Welcome back, students. In today's video, we are going to dive deep into the terminology of Incoterms, a set of rules used in international trade to define the responsibilities of buyers and sellers. Specifically, we will be exploring all 11 terms, including EXW, FCA, CPT, SIP, DAP, DPU, DDP, FOS, FOB, CFR, and SIF. By the end of this video, you will have a thorough understanding of these terms, their meaning, and their applications. EXW, Ex Works. EXW is the simplest of all Incoterms, and it requires the seller to make the goods available at a designated location, often the factory or warehouse. The buyer is responsible for loading the goods onto the transportation and paying for all subsequent transportation costs. This term transfers the maximum obligation to the buyer, making it the least risk for the seller. FCA, Free Carrier. FCA is another term where the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to a specified place. However, in this term, the responsibility for loading the goods onto transportation is on the seller and not the buyer. The seller also bears the costs of export clearance, and the buyer takes responsibility thereafter. FOS, Free Alongside Ship. FOS is applicable only for sea-based transactions. It refers to the seller delivering the goods alongside the dock where the buyer's ship is waiting for loading. Any costs incurred in making the goods available alongside the ship and loading them onto the ship are borne by the seller. FOB, Free On Board. FOB is a similar term to FOS, but it places more responsibility on the buyer. Under this term, the seller is responsible only for getting the goods on board the ship at the named port of loading. CPT, Carriage Paid To. CPT is a term where the seller is responsible for the costs and risks associated with the transportation of the goods to the destination. However, the risk is transferred to the buyer at the time of delivery to the carrier, in this case, the transportation option chosen by the seller. CFR, Cost and Freight. CFR is a term that places the responsibility of all costs related to the transportation of the goods to the named port of destination on the seller. The buyer is responsible for all the costs associated with unloading the cargo and the subsequent transportation. SIF, Cost, Insurance and Freight. SIF is similar to CFR, but the seller is also responsible for securing marine insurance during transit to the named port of destination. SIP, Carriage and Insurance Paid To. SIP is a term where the seller is responsible for the transportation costs just like captain. However, under this term, the seller is also responsible for insuring the goods against damage, theft, or loss during transit. The buyer takes responsibility for the goods after they are delivered to the chosen carrier. DAP, Delivered at Place. DAP is another term that places the responsibility of delivering the goods to a specific site on the seller. At this point, the seller hands over control to the buyer, and they are responsible for all subsequent risks and costs. DPU, Delivered at Place Unloaded. DPU is a lesser-known term. It is similar to DAP with the only difference being that the buyer is responsible for unloading the goods. The seller's responsibility continues until the point that the cargo is unloaded. DDP, Delivered Duty Paid. DDP is the term where the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to the destination and clearing customs on behalf of the buyer. The buyer is responsible for the unloading of goods and taking control of the shipment. That's all from our side. ISIS Tmimestump signing off. Please like and subscribe if this video imparted some value to you. Thank you.